We landed in Panama City, which was both modern and wealthy by Central American standards. And then we drove an hour to the Tamarin National Park and on to the Canopy Tower, situated at the top of a steep hill. The Canopy Tower used to be a US radar station, but now the converted tower is used for housing guests and bird watching from the observatory deck. The hummingbirds welcomed us as we entered the tower. The second and third floor had been renovated to provide guest rooms, and the top floor had a colorfully decorated lounge next to the dining area. Right after settling in, we went out on our own to explore the forest road we had just driven up. We could hear the howlers, and then we looked up and saw a few in the trees right next to the road.
Oh, maybe not.
As we were looking up, suddenly an unknown creature walked out of the woods and right past our feet. It wasn't until later that it was identified to us as a coati. Later, when we walked down the road with our guided group, we watched one of Kevin's favorite birds through the scope. And then our guide led us off the trail and pointed way up into the hollow of a tree where these cute little night monkeys slept during the day. Or not. Each morning before breakfast, we began our day on the observatory deck, listening to the howler monkeys in the distance and spotting many birds. There was an abundance of toucans. Sometimes we saw as many as 8 or 9 sitting in a tree. With patience, we saw lots of other birds up close. After breakfast, we were entertained by the resident Tamarin monkeys, who were accustomed to receiving a banana handout from the kitchen staff each morning.
No prehensile tail, if you notice, no fighting, no fighting. Hey, stop it.
Each day, our birdmobile took us to a different location to look for wildlife.
That is such a beautiful view.
That's the male. The females are bigger. So
It's eating.
actually it's moving, which is kind of surprised because these guys are more nocturnal.
It was so exciting. Almost right away we found a sloth. Little did we know that this was the first of many sloths we would see.
But this one is eating.
Yeah, this one is eating actually.
Just to the left of that, there's a little blob.
Oh, yeah. Wow. He's looking at you.
We even found a perfect spot for a human mammal.
Wow.
He's a monkey.
Yoga, there we are.
At the botanical gardens, we were greeted by a very large spider monkey roaming free on the grounds. Soon after, we spotted an animal we had never seen before, the northern tamandua, an anteater, found in tropical forests from southern Mexico to Central America.
how about that, George?
Yeah. Oh, look at it. Cool. That is a good picture opportunity now with the nice marking on his back.
And with the help of our guides, Alex and Jorge, we saw many colorful birds.
So the male is the upper one because he's a little more colorful than she. So hummingbirds back to the route of the Kiskadee.
You say I'm good.
The most rewarding finds were at the very end. Another species of woodpecker for Kevin, and the startlingly blue-colored cotinga. And while we were all busy looking up in the trees, there were several agouti roaming around, a tropical rodent that was also new to us. And it's a mystery how our guide spotted this camouflaged snake in among the trees. Back at the Canopy Tower, a pre-dinner snack always awaited us. And then it was checklist time. Our guide would go through a comprehensive booklet of birds and mammals and read off the ones that we had seen or heard that day.
And number 418 and 419 down below, the boat-built flycatcher is something. And then we have roast DiMaggio.
One of our tours was to the famed Pipeline Trail, a 17-kilometer World War II service road that was built for but never used by a petroleum pipeline and is now a great way to get to the interior of the national park. We saw more black howler and spider monkeys, different species of trogons, and some new birds.
Three feet up,
Oh,
directly up.
oh, there it is. Sure, I wasn't looking high
Yeah,
enough.
exactly. You're not looking the right angle.
Wasn't looking
So.
Oh, that's the male. You see, no?
I'm not. My eyes haven't focused on anything. Oh, I've seen him.
Hummer, you mean? Or the antenna?
Wow, the hummingbird's still there.
Yeah, he's still
Yeah.
He's calling.
There were so many beautiful hummingbirds, but the cutest was the tiny coquette hummingbird.
Hummingbird in the world, but it's the third, I think. The third smaller hummingbird in the world. Coquette.
Oh, nice. Look at that.
The smaller one is the bee hummingbird in Cuba. This is the third smallest hummingbird in the world. Yeah, look at that.
And double bonus, as we were driving back, one of the guests looked up into the trees and saw a sloth with a baby.
She's doing very careful in that tree because that tree has a spike. Little thorn. Brown-throated three-toed sloth, they're active during the day.
And they're smaller.
Brown-throated.
Are they smaller?
They're smaller than two-toed.
We returned to the Pipeline Trail a few days later and began where we had left off at the Rainforest Discovery Center. We were very lucky to see a second coquette hummingbird. These tiny hummingbirds sure have long names. Along the trail was an observatory tower, which gave us a different view above the tree canopy. We drove alongside the Canal River to reach our next destination, the Chagres River.
So what are you looking at here? No, I just back on the seat again. Take it away.
Yet another beautiful woodpecker. And next to it, notice the cut leaves walking down the tree. We saw leafcutter ants practically everywhere we went. And once again, while everyone was looking up at the birds, there was a bit of action down on the ground. A young coati was telling an older one to get off his territory.
The younger one is the one that's nice color. It's the older one.
The younger one?
Yeah.
The dark colored one? He's the one who's really saying, get out of here.
Here comes the old one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does look old now that you look at him.
Yeah.
Kind of bony.
But they're both adults.
Uh-huh. Not worth fighting over.
The Ammo Ponds, so named because of its proximity to the munitions dump, is a wetland in a grassy marsh.
This is the yellow-tailed orioles.
Yeah, I saw that. Nice. Yellow. Yellow. That's why I'm so
Yellow-tailed
excited.
oriole.
One day we drove from the west, or Pacific side of Panama to explore the Caribbean side. We entered the San Lorenzo Park and immediately saw a family of black howlers. Our guide set out a picnic lunch for us, and afterwards we explored the remains of the 18th century San Lorenzo castle. Tino knew exactly where to take us. Inside one of the fortress caves was a resident bat. At this point, we were getting a little blasé about the number of sloths we were seeing. One of our favorite days was a boat excursion accompanied by our favorite guests from our trip, Cindy from Vermont and Gerd and Ursula from Pennsylvania.
And the lake looks in good shape right now. It's getting good water.
We headed out to the canal laneway, passing large container ships that were going into or had just come through the locks. It was much more peaceful as we entered one of the channels and drifted slowly, observing all the wildlife. And once again, a howler, but then a new species of monkey. Panama City was not far away, and so one day we explored the large urban metropolitan park. As soon as we entered, we found another sloth.
Is this the same kind of tree that's right beside the Canopy Tower?
Canopy Tower, yes. Yeah. Barrigong.
It's got quite the rough on its bottom.
It's quite active.
It was a beautiful, large park, if not quite as many birds.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But we had fun observing an agouti that was clearly accustomed to people. We couldn't come all the way to Panama without visiting the famed Panama Canal, so we went to observe the Miraflores locks on the Pacific side. We started in the museum where there was a stop-motion simulation of being on a ship passing through the locks. And then we went outside to see the real thing. The huge ships are tied to locomotives that pull them from Gatun Lake into the lock. Then the water is drained from the lock doors open, and the boat is pulled out at the lower water level of the Pacific Ocean. The three little sailboats shared their lock with another big ship. And they got hand-pulled through the lock by canal employees. The whole process to get through the locks took about an hour, although to cross the complete canal from ocean to ocean is a full day trip. And there was wildlife. Kevin was not too interested in the locks, but he enjoyed watching this nearby flycatcher. We returned for a second time to the plantation trail, and since we had only one guide instead of two, I begged to borrow a second scope, with much pleading and promises to handle this expensive instrument with extreme care.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Kevin got to see some of his favorite birds again.
And this is the male, so you can tell the male and female because of the red cheek.
They really hang down quite a ways from his tail.
And I took advantage of having my own scope to follow a coati rooting around across the river.
It's a howler!
I need to get this in my Canopy Tower post.
In the evenings after dinner, we would often head back up to the observatory, and occasionally, just outside the dining hall window, we would catch a possum enjoying a banana. Our last tour from the Canopy Tower was to the summit ponds, where we watched various water-loving birds such as this well-hidden aninga and various types of kingfishers.
Like moving there in the back.
For the second part of our trip, we traveled 2 hours inland to El Valle to check out the wildlife in the highlands. The Canopy Lodge was this magnificently beautiful property surrounded by flowers and trees and a fruit feeder for birds and squirrels, which is actually broadcast on a webcam sponsored by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. The property even had its own natural swimming pool, which one of us took advantage of in one of the less cool days. But for all the natural beauty on the property, the surrounding area was mostly rural farmland, and a few bird spotting stops were just along country roads. We enjoyed one day at the beach house belonging to the owner of the Canopy family, where we had lunch, a swim, and a walk along the pristine beach. On the way back, we saw an owl by the side of the road and a brave falcon perched in a tree next to the busy highway. We explored the Cerro Gatay Park twice. The first time was with really slow people in our group, so we didn't get very far. But we did see 2 more sloths, one on the way to the park.
Cool. Good size, too.
Yeah, it's a good size. Good size.
And another on the way back.
I didn't know sloths did that. I always thought they went down to the ground. Knows that the branch it's hanging onto is a little bit thin, so it's got a second branch.
The second time we drove to Cerro Gatay, we stopped to see a couple screech owls napping in a tree. Then we climbed to the very top and got a panoramic view of the whole valley. We didn't see a single bird in this park at all, but lots of other interesting things. including another sloth and baby. And then another sloth.
I think it's a male. Ah, yes, it's a male. I can see the patching his back.
One of the nicer tours was through the El Macho Park, just up the street from the lodge. It had a pretty waterfall and lots of hiking trails so that we actually did some walking. Of course, our guide slinked along in some parts, listening and keeping his eyes open for birds.
Good job.
Amazing.
The highlights of this day was another type of woodpecker for Kevin, and yet another sloth. We think we counted almost 20 on this whole trip. And our fourth species of owl was wide awake and active. Our last tour was along a country road. Our sharp-eyed guide peeked into the trees and found these sleeping bats. We saw a few different hummingbirds, including this one sitting on a nest.
Oh, look at him with the light on him now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just glows.
And our guide could hear a finch calling for quite a while, and finally spotted it hidden low in the grass.